At the Quaker Inn on the campus of the University of Akron in downtown Akron, Ohio. The radio broadcast is underwritten by Cascade Audio. Today's program is generously sponsored by the Margaret Clark Morgan Foundation. Additionally, we would like to recognize the Akron Beacon Journal, Ohio.com, for being a legacy sponsor for the Akron Roundtable. Today's luncheon presentation speaker will be introduced by Rick Keller, who is the president of the Margaret Clark Morgan Foundation.
I think you were looking for a rescue from my executive. You've done an awesome job. Thank you. One number that should resonate in everyone's mind today is 1,100. This is the number of college students that die by suicide every year. Given the average life expectancy of an American college kid today, this represents over 65,000 years of life, opportunity, innovation, kindness, love, caring, and being part of the family. I won't talk about Alison's accomplishments that are listed in the bulletin there, but I would like to ask us, how do we know Alison? And I'll tell you that Tom Craig, our director of mental health, when we first started doing our forum series, became aware of Alison and her work. And I can remember going down the hall one day and having Tom say, "Hey Rick, I got an idea for a speaker." And it was back when I was a little bit more controlling as the boss, I think. And I said, I want to see who this could be. And this wonderful, beautiful young lady was giving an interview on it. It was a YouTube presentation of who she was, why she was doing what she was doing, and about her organization. And I thought, this is the person to bring to town to talk about campus mental health and safety, which clearly aligns with the mission of the Margaret Clark Morgan Foundation. I'll tell you that when we met Alison in 2009, Active Minds had student chapters of about 100 to 150 chapters on different college campuses throughout America, primarily east of the Mississippi, but really a nationwide organization. And I can remember thinking and saying to Alison, "Oh man, when are you going to get to 200? And then I was doing some research today as I was preparing, and back in 2006, I think there were 67. Today, they're almost right at 400 college campus chapters nationwide. And while we were eating lunch, I heard something about some high school affiliations too. Pretty cool work for a young lady who was inspired by the loss of her brother. This collaborative, engaging, passionate, and earnest leader has taken head-on the challenge of mental health on college campuses, and we applaud that. I am proud to introduce our good friend, without whose passion and organization, the 1,100 would be a much higher number. And I thank you for attending today to offer all of our collective support and help, have an honest conversation about this challenge in America so that we can help her take that number from 1,100 to 0. Ladies and gentlemen, Alison Malmon.
Truly, I am so thrilled to be here today, and I thank the Margaret Clark Morgan Foundation for both sponsoring this lunch as well as the long-time support of Active Minds and the foundation has given us under the great direction that Tom has given me, the program officer, working with the support that we've gotten through the foundation. As you heard from Rick, I am the founder and executive director of Active Minds. I only have about 15 minutes to talk, so I'm going to try to do this pretty quickly and leave opportunity for question and answer at the end, because I know a lot of people come to conversations about mental health and suicide with their own questions and their own experiences and their own approach. So I want to make sure it's at least an opportunity for that. What I will say is that I'm both honored and pleased to be here, and just pleased that there's a conversation around young adult mental health, campus mental health happening here at this roundtable here on this campus. This is a conversation that is too seldom had and is too often necessary. And part of the mission and the motto of Akron Minds is to change the conversation about mental health. And where that starts is starting a conversation about mental health, because there are too many people who struggle and they do so alone. They do so in silence because they think they're different. So I'm so grateful to the roundtable for making this a conversation. So very briefly, I want to talk to you a little bit about Active Minds and talk about the lessons that I've learned since becoming a part of starting Active Minds. I I was a freshman in college at the University of Pennsylvania when I lost my big brother, my only sibling, Brian, to suicide. Brian was 4 years and 4 days older than me. I had gotten into his top choice school, was a star at his Ivy League university, Dean's List student, 3.8 GPA, acapella president, sports editor of the school newspaper, you name it. Was a star on everything on the outside. But in his freshman year at his college, he started experiencing a pretty severe mental health disorder. Never really learned, it's never really diagnosed properly, but the best diagnosis we had was schizoaffective disorder. Brian started experiencing very severe depression and psychosis, he was hearing voices, and he started experiencing that in his freshman year, February of his freshman year of college. But he didn't tell anybody until November of his senior year. He went through 3 years on campus during what we're all told is the best time of our life. In pain, in isolation, in fear, hearing things that weren't real, thinking as though something was wrong with him, that everybody else had had it all together, and it was just something that he had done wrong and that he needed to pull himself out of. Finally, in November of his senior year, he went to the school's counseling services. He saw a therapist there. He ended up coming home, taking a voluntary leave of absence, and that was the time when our family, my mother is a social worker, my mother and I, and my stepfather and my father learned what Brian was going through. But for him at that point, it was too late. He had lived in this isolation for 3 years, and while he went into incredible treatments and supports from our family, he had lost hope. And for those of you who experience depression or have loved ones who have, you know that hope is what we all need to hold on, especially during severe depression. Brian ended up taking his life about a year after taking that leave of absence from college. I was a freshman at the University of Pennsylvania when Brian died, and what struck me, the emotion that struck me the most was fear after he died, because Brian and I were really similar people, and my campus and his campus were pretty similar campuses, and it scared the daylights out of me that could have happened to him, and it very well could happen to me. Who's to say that the depression and the psychosis he started experiencing could have been something that I experienced? And while his friends are fabulous people, none of them said anything to him when they were worried about him on campus because they didn't know what to say. They had never really been taught what this was all about. He was masking it and hiding it from everybody, so they wanted to honor him and kind of not say anything either. Same deal. Lovely people. My friends were fabulous, but nobody would have known what to say to me if they started seeing me experience some pretty severe depression and isolating behaviors. And then I jumped into research, and this fear was compounded because not only was this Brian's story, it could have been my story, but when you look at the research, almost every mental health disorder first presents at the high school and college age. Depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, eating disorders, anxiety disorders. The age of onset is 15 to 25. The fact that Brian started hearing these voices when he was 18 is totally typical. 75% of people with schizophrenia become ill between the ages of 15. And so his life trajectory was so similar to so many other students on campus. So at that point, for really selfish reasons, I started what was a student group on my campus to get people talking about mental health issues, to take everything that I had learned from my personal experiences and this research and get it into the hands and the hearts and the minds of other students on my campus. I needed to do something with it. Fortunately, as I had expected that it happened, this is something that was much bigger than my story and Brian's story, and this is the story of millions of college students across the country. When you look at these numbers, a recent study showed that nearly half of college students report having felt so depressed in the past year it was difficult to function. Nearly half of college students are saying it's difficult to function because of depression. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for college students. This issue is real. This issue is not just my family, and very early on, I could tell from my peer support on campus that student group that I started at Penn could be and would be much bigger than Penn. So I graduated and started a nonprofit with the goal to develop and support chapters of that student group on campuses nationwide. As you heard from Rick, now 11 years later, this has been my full-time job ever since, and we are on 400 college, university, high school campuses across the country. We are proud that we are in almost every state of the United States, no longer just east of Mississippi, but we certainly started there. And really what I'm most proud of is that we have 9,000 students every year who are signing up to be part of Akronist chapters on their campuses because they want to do something with the experiences that they've had. They want to do something with the knowledge that they've learned. They want to prevent their peers from going through the same struggles and stigma that they felt. They want people to start talking about these issues, to know that they're not alone, and to get help as soon as possible. Akronist chapters are not support groups, they are advocacy groups on campus. What these chapters are doing is they're serving as the outreach arm for their campus counseling center. They're serving as a non-threatening source of education for their peers. They're planning events like speakers, panel discussions, movie screens, benefit runs, chalking on the sidewalks, talking about how to promote positive mental health while also talking about suicide prevention. Because this is not a black and white issue, and it's not just about people with mental illness and everybody else. We all are on a spectrum. We may not all have mental illness, but we all have mental health. And what our chapters are doing, what Akronist is doing, is really creating that conversation so that everybody knows that it's okay to talk about whatever you're going through. If you think it's a diagnosable mental illness or not, it doesn't matter. If you're struggling with it, if it's impacting your life, talk to somebody about it. Talk to somebody you trust about it. Because the earlier that you can get help for somebody, for yourself, for somebody in need, the more likely recovery is possible. These chapters, I'm proud to say there's a chapter right here at the University of Akron. There are chapters in about a dozen, close to a dozen campuses right around here as well. Information is all on our website for the total list. We have a chapter in Akron, Penn State, Walsh, John Carroll, Wallace, Case, Cayuga Community College, and Hiram. All in this local area, plus quite a few others in the state. Our chapters are creating change on campus. They are promoting awareness. They are promoting education. And now, through support from the Akron Morgan Foundation, they're achieving policy change and advocacy on campus, including getting mental health orientations into mental health into freshman orientations, and getting hotline numbers printed on the back of student ID cards, and getting professors to post the information of the counseling center on the syllabi of their classes. What I really learned over the past 11 years, and really the message that I want us to talk about today, is the fact that this is not rocket science. In many ways, what I've done was something that was needed 50 years ago, and for some reason nobody had done it. What we need to be doing is creating a conversation around mental health. I have learned that my generation and the generations coming up after me are much more able, and they're much more comfortable to talking about mental health issues. They're talking about it amongst themselves. They're talking about it amongst their friends. And in fact, what we learn is that when students are in crisis, they're talking to their peers. 67% of students who are feeling suicidal tell a friend first. 2/3 of students who are suicidal tell a friend before anybody else. Only 2% tell an adult. And so when we're talking about mental health issues, we have to involve young adults themselves. We have to involve the generation who is in college, who is in high school, who is coming up through elementary and middle school. We have to teach them very early on about resiliency, promoting positive mental health, how to help a friend in need, what to do if you're worried about yourself or a friend. Because this is where the conversation is happening. We cannot ignore it. We cannot not talk about it and think it's going to go away, because it's still going to be happening. And it's going to be happening amongst people who don't necessarily have the education to be using the right words or knowing where to get help. So if that conversation is happening, it's our job to arm young adults with the tools that they need in order to promote positive mental health and to get the services that they need as quickly as possible, and to know that they're not alone. And so I implore you, as we go on past this lunch, to go back to whomever is in their life, whether it be a child, a cousin, a niece, nephew, a friend, and ask them how they're doing. Ask them how their friends are doing. Ask them if they talk about hurting themselves or think about killing themselves. Opening up that conversation and opening up that dialogue truly will change and save lives. That's the work that our chapter members are doing on campuses across the country. Their advisors are doing to promote that awareness on campus. And it's just so imperative for us to do nationally. As we learned with the tragedy of Robin Williams just last month, this issue touches all of us. There's nobody who is immune to facing mental health issues, Because mental health is part of your overall health. It is part of our overall well-being every single day. Robin Williams struggled with some sort of mental illness, whether it be depression. We don't know what the diagnosis is, it doesn't matter. But 95% of people who die by suicide have a diagnosable mental health disorder at the time of their death. And what is so crucial to know is that mental illness is real, suicide is real, and suicide is also preventable. And suicide is preventable from crisis intervention right from the beginning to all the way upstream to promoting positive mental health amongst others. And so by opening up the conversation early, by encouraging our children to talk about mental health issues, by encouraging our friends to share what they're going through, to know that there are resources available and that seeking help is a sign of strength, we can prevent people from even having to think about suicide. We've been getting those thoughts into their minds so that we can change that number of 1,100 college students dying by suicide every single year. I'm going to close there so that we have plenty of time for questions and answers. Again, I so appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation today. I appreciate each of you in the audience, especially the students who are here. You are demonstrating first and foremost that young adults want to be involved in this conversation. And it is so crucial for us adults to involve the voices that we're talking about, because they know what needs to be said, how it needs to be said, what the issues are that they're going through, and they're willing to talk about it. So let's get that conversation going. Let's change it to one that promotes mental health, that is accepting of people with mental health disorders, and recognizing that we're all on this spectrum, so let's all treat each other with respect. Thank you.
Our speaker has graciously agreed to respond to written questions from the audience. At this time, I invite David Connor, the program chair of the Akron Roundtable Board of Directors, to present your question.
We'll start off with this question. Your statistics are rather stunning. About 1,100 annual college suicides. And I guess I pose this question. To what degree does mental health on campus interrelate with other student body issues on campus, such as binge drinking and inappropriate sexual behavior?
It's absolutely the case that while mental health is part of your overall health, it also doesn't sit in isolation from any issues that students face. So often, college students are binge drinking to mask signs of depression or to self-medicate for other mental health issues like depression. The same in engaging in risky behaviors. Unfortunately, I talked to a friend about this. Unfortunately, it's okay to say, I got drunk the last 7 nights, but it's not okay to say I cried last night. And so often on college campuses, some of these more risky behaviors are, students are doing it because it's okay. And lo and behold, when you look underneath it, it's so often depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorder, self-hatred that's really causing so many of these risky behaviors, so we need to address all of that.
Obviously, we have a lot of parents in the audience. And in your remarks, you indicated how infrequently parents are taking into the confidence of a child who is struggling with a mental health issue. Are there some subtle cues that parents and friends and colleagues can look forward to tip them off that an individual is struggling with mental health issues? And relatedly, how much is HIPAA a barrier for parents in trying to get engaged with their child's mental health?
Two great questions. And the first thing I would say is, regardless of if you think it's diagnosable or not, or is this a serious issue or not, just ask. Are you struggling? Is something going on right now? Is there something that you want to talk about? We do not need to be at a place where it has to be clinical in order to be talked about and in order to be asked. We talk often about normal college stress. Well, normal college stress, that bar has gotten so high that nothing is normal and nothing should be normal. And if it's interfering with somebody's life for whatever reason, talk to them and let's get support more. There are definitely very clear signs of clinical depression, whether it be sleeping too much or not sleeping enough, eating too much, not eating enough. I think really what we see in young adults is alcoholism and use of substances, as well clear sign or not. If you're worried about somebody, trust your gut and ask them. As it relates to HIPAA and FERPA, one of the things that often we'll hear about is this relationship between a university and students. And what we're seeing more and more universities doing, universities were holding back because of HIPAA, because there were a slew of lawsuits that were going on between parents and universities for any variety of reasons. What we're seeing more and more universities do is when there's a student who's coming into their counseling center, the first thing they're doing is on the intake form saying, is it okay for us to tell somebody in your family if we're worried about you, or if it gets to a more serious place? And the vast majority of times, students say yes. And so I would encourage you to open up that conversation again with your child and your student to say, let them know it's okay to talk to me. Put it on paper so that they feel comfortable doing it. HIPAA is a barrier in our minds, but it doesn't have to be a barrier practically. And there are a lot of ways for us to do it.
Here's a very thoughtful question from a member of our audience who asks, in my daily business, I educate adults in anti-bullying, de-escalation on techniques, and we are uncovering mental illness, depression, violence, and despair in younger and younger groups. Our most recent research shows suicides in children as young as 9 years old. What can we do in light of this?
It's devastating, and it hits all of us. Somebody said earlier today, and I will keep repeating it, this is a topic that is always timely because it impacts us all the time. What we can do about it is we can start teaching resiliency. We can start talking about depression. We can start talking about having bad days and sad days with our preschoolers, with our elementary school kids. We can start engaging them early in what they're feeling and how they're feeling. Not just saying, I want my kid to be happy, but I want my kid to be adjusted. And I want to talk to my kid about how he or she is doing in life and how he or she is feeling and making sure that they love themselves. Because so seldom is that actually the message that's going across to youth, and then it's not transferring once somebody goes through puberty and goes into young adulthood. So we can start this education early, and as our children grow up, there's more and more opportunity to talk more and more about the clinical diagnoses and the signs of depression and all of those. But we don't have to wait until they're 20 to start talking about this. Active Minds, interestingly, and this is a side note, is primarily on college campuses because college students can start any student group that they want. They have to prove to the student government that it's a viable organization, it's different from other organizations, etc. When we have, on a limited basis, when we have approached young high schools and other schools, middle schools about something like Akron Minds, we are met with a lot of reluctance from the principals, the school board, the teachers. There's a generational gap in how we think and talk about mental health issues. And I saw it from the very beginning after I lost my brother. My friends were extremely supportive. His friends were extremely supportive. My mom lost her friends because they didn't know what to say. They eventually came back. It wasn't because they wanted to punish her, but they didn't know what to say, so they stepped away. My friend said, Alison, we don't know what to say. What can we do? There's a generational gap in how people are thinking and talking about mental health. And so we are focused on young adult advocacy because it's young adults who are changing the world, and we're changing the world around mental health and mental illness. And so as it gets younger and younger, and we're seeing this in younger and younger kids, let's engage them earlier. Let's talk about it earlier in age-appropriate ways so that we don't have to get to a point where we're just talking about suicide prevention in people with the most serious illnesses.
Another member of our audience asked this question. You mentioned during your remarks that mental health issues often begin to emerge in individuals between the ages of 15 and 25. Does research indicate the chemical changes associated with maturation play a part? Is there a genetic predisposition?
Yes. One of the challenges in mental health and mental illness is that we don't know as much as we want to know about all of the components. But what we do know is that there is there's a genetic connection between mental illness and Lyme mental illness. However, we have no family history. Any of my brothers still struggle with affective disorder. So it's not solely genetic. I like to tell students when I talk to them, if there's heart disease that runs in your family, you're going to make sure that you watch your heart. But if it doesn't run in your family, you can still have heart disease. So there's a genetic disposition, there is a biological component, the brain is changing. The brain is changing, until people are in their 20s. There's also social stressors, the transition, the change, the loss that young adults feel connecting, going to high school, transitioning to college. What we know is that it's generally some combination of those social and biological factors that is often a precipitator for mental illnesses in adults. It's not always, but that's really the most commonly understood and appreciated, we say, onset for why mental health disorders when they first present in the school education.
Another member of our audience asked this: are there any observations on the correlation between increased violence on student campuses and suicide prevention?
It's a great question, and I don't know if I know the answer. I don't know of any research between the two. What often happens when we talk about violence on campus is we think about something like Virginia Tech and other tragedies that then people jump to, well, that person was mentally ill. I remember vividly after the shootings at Virginia Tech, there was a CNN.com banner that said, Cho diagnosed mentally ill in 2006, as though that was the answer. And I think really what we need to be looking at, so I don't know the answer to the question, but I think it is imperative that we do not just connect violence with mental illness, because the vast majority of people who are struggling with their mental health are never going to be violent. And if they are, it's going to be towards themselves. And what happened after the tragedy at Virginia Tech is that I had Asian American students coming to me saying, well, I don't want to go walk in the counseling center now because people are going to think that I'm like that guy. I'm not like that guy. I'm not as crazy as he was. I don't need to go get help. So we need to break that connection between mental illness and violence that so much too often happens in our society as we talk about it. So I don't actually know of any research that links suicide and the prevalence of suicide on campus with violence, but I would just encourage all of us to take that step back and remove the link that is too often made between your thoughts of mental illness and violence themselves.
We have several questions seeking more information about how Active Minds works. Here's one of them. Is Active Minds also engaging faculty in the conversation? Is there an initiative to train students, resident advisors, and faculty in gatekeeper training?
Great question. So, Active Minds chapters, the chapter system is the main component of Active Minds as a national organization. We also have about a dozen programs that we roll out on a national level to bring attention to and support for our chapters. The chapter system are all student groups on campuses, but they all must have an on-campus advisor. Oftentimes, those advisors are somebody in the counseling center. Sometimes they are faculty members. We don't care as a national organization who that advisor is. We encourage our chapters to get support on campus to really help the transition from year to year, help the bureaucracy working on campus. Many of our chapters then, do programs and events that we create from the national headquarters, but they're also free to do their own programming if they find other programming that might work better for them or they want to be creative around it. Many of our chapters have worked with faculty one way or another. We as a national organization actually on Monday will be signing a partnership with Mental Health First Aid, which is run through the National Council of Behavioral Health and a few other programs to bring mental health first aid free of charge to college students who are part of the Active Minds Network. That's a version of the gatekeeper training for anybody who's familiar, but that's going to be made available to the student and the staff members who are part of Active Minds chapters.
Through your work in Active Minds, I'm sure that you've observed some university communities have more limited behavioral health resources than others. What, if anything, can you do to fortify those campuses to better address this situation?
So I have a couple of responses to that question. I think, in some ways, there are going to be some campuses that have more resources to be able to put towards mental health just because of the nature of the size of the campus and the resources coming in. And one of the things that I've been particularly proud and impressed by is that many of those schools, recognizing their limited capacity, have made and continue to make connections with community-based services and providers who can and will specialize in college students. And so recognizing that the university is not going to necessarily be able to provide the resources services, they're creating the relationships with community-based services to be able to do that. On the flip side, when there are campuses that would have the means and have just not decided to focus on prioritize mental health, that's where Active Minds comes in. And I've heard multiple times that a lot of staff and faculty and administrators can sit around a table and talk tomorrow, but if one student comes in and says this is an issue and I'm going to demand that we make change, and I have 50 signatures on this piece of paper that will make change too, that's when change is made. And so much of the work of what our chapters are doing and our students are doing is creating that transformative change on campus to ensure that counseling centers are properly staffed based on the demographics and the size of the student body. To make sure that the counseling center is not in the far end of campus where no student can access even if they wanted to because it's too far away, or it's time to take this out of the shadows, take mental illness, take counseling out of the shadows and bring it into the health center, bring it to the main area of campus. That's a lot of what our chapters are doing, bringing that student voice and that student advocacy to create transformative policy change. And again, that's with the help of our Morgan Foundation and a project that we launched actually this past year.
Through your work in Active Minds, have you observed one campus, one university, which really is best practices that does an excellent job of promoting good mental health on campus?
I love the question, and I'm laughing because the second part of the project that the Morgan Foundation has been supporting of ours in the past year is the launch of an award of excellence. So the answer is right now, no. I don't have that answer. There are a couple that stand out to me, but simply because I know of them, and one example is NYU that offers counseling services throughout New York City, recognizing that the vast majority of their students don't live on campus, and so having one counseling center with counselors simply right there isn't going to work. They're being responsive to student needs. That's one example from years ago, but with the help of the Morgan Foundation, Active Minds is launching an award of excellence where we are inviting campuses to submit, we'll be announcing this in a couple of months, we're inviting campuses to submit a self-nomination or nomination of others to be recognized for addressing student well-being and student mental health as an overall component of ensuring the success of students on campus. So ask me again in a year and I will answer.
This question is really related to the prior one. What advice would you give to parents of high school students who are looking at colleges for assessing a school's capacity and skill in handling mental health issues on campus?
It's a great question, and it's one I get calls from parents frequently about this. So a couple of answers. One, we check the award of excellence and those that we recognize, and next year and moving on. So that would be first and foremost. I think the other thing to look at is just basic. There's no good way to know. I would encourage you to call the counseling center. Get to know them as much as you can. Get as much information as you can. One of the things that there is a nationally there's national recommendations around ratio. So it's recommended that a counseling center has one counselor for every 1,000 to 1,500 students on campus. So you can look at just the pure numbers of the counseling center on your campus to the number of students on campus. You can look at the specialties of the clinicians on campus. Is there a clinician that specializes in LGBTQ youth, and do you know that your child is questioning his intersectionality, whatever it may be, the diversity of the counseling center. So that would be one area I would look at. The other thing, again, I want to continue to promote is that mental health is not just something that sits in the counseling center. And if it is just something that sits in the counseling center, then you've got to keep looking, because mental health is something that coaches need to be addressing, RAs need to be addressing. There need to be student groups. There needs to be student activity around mental health. There should be a cross-campus collaboration and a task force that's addressing mental health. It's time to take this out of the shadows and treat mental health like the public health issue that it is. And what you can really do is examine if that particular university is treating mental health like a public health issue. So look at for the clinical services, look at the ratio, look at the clinicians themselves, do as much investigative work as you can. But then in a broader picture, if you're just worried about your kid and want to make sure that he or she has the support when he goes to school, look to see what else the university is doing in addition to just having counselors.
We have time for 3 more quick questions here. Several people in the audience would like more information from you if you can provided on that horrific statistic you offered up on annual college suicides at 1,100. The question's generally asked, how does that compare with, say, similar statistics for Europe or in the United States for the age group 18 to 24, which would include non-college students?
I don't know how it compares internationally. What I would say is suicide is the third leading cause of death for high school students. It is the second leading cause of death for college students. When you look at it, we actually do see that the rate is lower for college students than their non-college, but same-aged peers. So there is some protective factor for going to college. You could always argue that it is, the means to go to school. There's a level of privilege that is connected to going to college. We don't exactly know the reasons, but we do know that it's the second leading cause of death. Everybody asks me what the first is. The first is just accidents. There's no good, there's no definitive answer to that first one. So suicide is really the leading health-related cause of death for college students. It is lower than the non-college attending age equivalent peers, but it is still taking the lives of at least 1,100 college students every single year. And as Rick said, that's 5,000 plus years lost of pretty incredible young people, that including my brother Brian.
All of us are well aware of our society's sort of legacy on stereotypical attitude towards mental health care. And as a country, we've made some progress there. But in your view, what can we as a society do to take the next step to promoting broader-based acceptance of proactive approaches to mental health care? Our society has had, it's well recognized in our society that mental health care has suffered from stereotypical attitudes towards mental health in our society. We made progress there, but what do we as a society need to do to take the next step to engender more broader-based acceptance of proactive mental health care?
I appreciate that. That's what I thought I heard, but I just wanted to make sure. I think, again, we were joking about this earlier. My background makes me believe that it's not anything beyond what any of us can do. It is simply, we need to start treating mental health like we treat every other health issue. We just need to start talking about it. If you had the flu, you wouldn't be afraid to say, I had the flu, I had to stay home today, I need to go to the doctor. Why is it that if you're struggling with depression, it's not okay to say that? And so we can all do very basic things that can change the way our society and in general thinks about mental health, which can then help us create policy change that's necessary to ensure that resources are put in that need to happen. So changing our language around mental health, very briefly. My brother didn't commit suicide. He died by suicide. He did not commit a crime. He didn't commit burglary, perjury. He didn't do anything wrong. He died of mental illness. And so let's take that word out of there. He wasn't bipolar. He wasn't schizophrenic. He wasn't depressed. He was a person who struggled with depression, schizophrenia, psychosis, whatever it may be. If we stop attributing ourselves and diagnosing ourselves as our labels, we can actually start recognizing that people with mental health issues are people. And we're all on this spectrum, and it hasn't changed. So there's basic language changes we can make. There are policy changes, thankfully, now there's actually parity, and there's actually help, visits to a counselor and visits to a therapist are actually covered by health insurance, mostly, at this point. That was a struggle for decades. We've gotten, fortunately, financially into that place, but there's a lot more policy that can be changed. But I think as each individual person in this room, we can make so much change just by starting a conversation and making sure that any of us who struggle, any person who does not think the world of themselves, feels the support and knows that they're not alone. Depression is an incredibly isolating illness to begin with. And then the way our society treats it and doesn't talk about it makes it that much more isolating. So people who are struggling in a severe depression cannot see a way out. We all have a role to play to help these people gain a voice and gain hope and get the support and resources that they need.
We'll close with this question. As is the case in all of our luncheons, we have pamphlets at the table explaining our program today and offering biographical information about you as our speaker. And of course, it reflects your Ivy League education, entrepreneurial spirit, It also includes information about your role as a trapeze instructor. So we've had several questions about that. So I capsulize it this way. Is being a trapeze instructor or a student, does that help promote good mental health, or does it promote crippling anxiety?
Well, I will say that our staff retreat every year from Acton Minds is I take everybody over to the trapeze school, and it's kind of both that happens there. Yes, so I in my spare time, I teach the flying trapeze, which is an activity that I would encourage everybody to do at some point in your life, because when else are you ever going to say that you flew in a trapeze? There are trapeze schools around the country, and joking aside, what trapeze does do is force you to focus on the moment, because you are focusing on holding onto that bar and not falling, which I think is imperative for all of us to do at any time. It's really hard to get away from your daily grind. You're thinking about family all the time, you're thinking about work, all of those pieces. When you're on the trapeze or you're doing something similar, you cannot think about anything but that activity, and so I actually think it's really rejuvenating. And if anybody is in the DC area and is interested in trying, look me up. I would be more than happy to teach you.
Ms. Malmon, thank you for being with us today. I truly, truly believe you did an outstanding job. We had so many questions up here, and David couldn't get to them all, but he did a great job of trying to get as many as possible in. But thank you so much for coming to us today. We have a nice presentation we want to make today. This is a Contemplative Sun by local artist and craftsman Alison Malmon. He's designed especially for the Akron Roundtable, and this is our gift to you. Thank you for coming to speak to us.
Thank you.
Thank you. We invite the audience to join us on Thursday, October 16, 2014, when the Akron Roundtable will present Dr. Beverly Warren, the new president of Kent State University. Again, thank you for coming today. We hope you enjoyed the luncheon. Bye. Next.